Why is art so expensive? I am Preston McCall. I am a painter and a commercial artist, a graphic designer, and a video maker. I produce these videos to inspire and stimulate other artists and interested people for the history of art with images and observations about art and art history. I enjoy showing some of these interesting and unique discoveries I have found. Being a painter myself, I approach art history from a different vantage point than most academic art historians. I do respect art historians greatly, as they certainly have filled my understanding of art considerably. My position is more from a painter's perspective and not from some academic or intellectual point of view. I attended the University of Kansas in the 1970s. I studied art, art history, painting, and architecture. I saw firsthand that the art historians had opinions about art that, from a painter's vantage point, did not always line up with what I actually saw in art. It really is a very broad subject and full of many opinions, but I see that it is a visual language and not just a subject about which much can be written. Many theories are promoted explaining how some painter used some magic theorem to design his compositions, his sense of color, or even the symbolism of the elements of the work. Okay, theories. I get that, but imagine where it comes from. For centuries, many of these esteemed scholars wandered through museums or the collections of important groups of paintings and tried to assert some logic on what was happening in these masterpieces. They invented triangular compositions. They proposed some set of definitions about the style and symbolism of painting at some period. Is it Mannerism? Is it Baroque? Is it High Renaissance? The reality is that it is just some painters were intrigued with colors and paint to the point that they produced some pieces based on their own ideas, apart from what some later art historians would decipher and interpret. The painter followed his heart and imagination, but also looked at what other work was being done at the same time and tried to make his fit in a little bit. Then there is the reason many painters painted, especially in the Renaissance. Paintings told a story. Many people could not read, and a pictorial story was like seeing a good cartoon. They could understand the glory and majesty of what was being depicted. Just imagine going to a long lecture about some subject and compare that to a Technicolor movie on the big screen. The visual communication tells a story with so much more detail. Churches realized this, so they hired painters to illuminate their altars and church walls to dazzle and inspire their subjects. They did not have television or radio to broadcast their story, but they did have Technicolor of sorts. Paintings served their purposes well, and the competition for painters became more and more intense. Then the royalty needed portraits. They did not have photography, so paintings of the king and his court were essential to broadcast their omnipotence and authority. Other wealthy patrons wanted some slightly scandalous mythological paintings based on Greek or Roman gods to portray naked beauties and delicious flesh. Great stories of the symbolism emerged as these paintings seemed to tie into the ancient classicism with the then current needs to justify various points of importance. Was it just some soft porn or just some intellectual fantasy? Why were all the figures naked? Did they not have clothes? Many periods of paintings emerged. Distinctive styles evolved. Some painters were treated as rock stars and lived opulent lives. Most suffered under the patronage of some autocratic patron who treated the painters with hot and cold respect. The painter was profoundly the slave to the patrons. Then, in the 1800s, photography became the main thing. Suddenly, a patron did not have to sit for hours to have his portrait painted. Painters began to look elsewhere. Painting of landscapes and still lifes, which were not very popular, became more and more important. Art became decoration for the walls of homes and castles and everywhere, and not just some accoutrement for the wealthy. Impressionism took over. Painters were now free to just paint and experiment with what they wanted to paint and with what they found curious and visually interesting. It would have been great if that was all it became. But slowly, the art dealers saw ways to make money and lots of it. They supported many painters under contract, and they paid them salaries for a fixed number of paintings or new paintings per month. The dealers sold the paintings at respectable markup, and profits became the main motive. They began to see that if they promoted and merchandised their selections, profits increased. The common person saw new and exciting changes in what was being perceived as good collectible painting. Most painters cannot sell their work for more than $100 in today's money, but some exploded. For instance, Monet, an impressionist in the late 1800s, was considered France's most important painter at the time and became quite wealthy. Others became superstars: Matisse, Picasso, Salvador Dali. Painting became a self introspection of what the painter was really intrigued with. Art became more about the painter searching inside his soul and realm for something that excited him and he felt was worth the time to develop it. Not just some imagery that some patron wanted to see on his wall. And of course, to shock and awe the public became also a game to many, many painters. Just look at Balthus, who early on openly admitted he was trying to push the limits of what sexual perversions he could portray in order to get some good press and sales. It worked, but is that art? Then wealthy Picasso thought so, and he bought one of Balthus's major paintings for quite a sum of money. Jump ahead to today. Someone tapes a banana onto a wall. I guess he's paying homage to the Warhol print of a banana. Who knows? Or how about Marcel Duchamp taking a print of the Mona Lisa and drawing a mustache on her? Then Rauschenberg did the same thing, but then erased the mustache. Mustache is his expression of painting. Some of today's painting has become more of a thinky contest and less of a craft of being able to handle the draftsmanship of painting towards some lofty goal of delineating the painter's idea of where his art is headed. Now, we have NFTs. Wow. People pay millions for what? We also have galleries paying giant sums of money to exhibit and promote some artists at these mega art fairs. Does it work? It does. They make money think because they're the big dogs, we can all learn from it and teach us how to pee in the high weeds and see what art today is really all about. It sounds like the hokey pokey a bit to me. So where is this all going? Well, there are still some very accomplished painters who are painting pictures from their heart using fine draftsmanship and well-executed painting techniques. Yes, there are still painters who actually are painting pictures, expressing their inner visions of where they think art is headed. You just have to brush off the chaff and look for what inspires you. Painting today is still a most interesting thing. It is an unregulated industry, and there are many, many people out there all trying to define it as something they see as vital, important, and valuable. It is really just about shocking the viewer to evoke some inner misunderstood emotions. Really? Is it still about some painter's search for something inside him or her, which is roughly defined as beauty? The only answer to this dilemma is to simply keep looking and look with open eyes and less chatter from the experts on the sidelines who are just trying to steer us away from what art should be and purchase their book. Enough said. I am a painter and I look at art and painting from a painter's perspective. It is still the most intriguing subject for me, but it may just be some other over intellectualized subject that seems impossible for most people to relate to. Okay, just keep looking, and you just might have a major conclusion, a moment of clarity. Like when I stood in front of the Mona Lisa in Paris and saw for a brief second a timeless beauty that I have never been able to feel again. Just keep looking. If you like seeing these videos about how an artist talks and shows great art, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It does help me make more of these. When I see some go somewhat viral, and I ask myself, why that one? It gives me a feel that perhaps others can appreciate how interesting some of the work is and how just seeing it speaks in a visual language that we have somehow smoked out in favor of rather politics or some news story that will be gone in a day or so. Art lasts, it is timeless, and we should all see that it is still a marvelous, marvelous thing, even 500 years past the Renaissance. I am Preston McCall, and I thank you for watching.